Good evening. Hello. Welcome. Happy Sunday. Glad that you are here for this latest episode of Our Ancestors Voices. This week, Our Ancestors Voices, a program sponsored each week by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And this week, our topic is the bizarre concept of Veterans Day here in the United Snakes of America. So we are glad that you are deciding to join us for this episode. We give thanks and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere and their struggle for justice, a righteous struggle that we always lift up. And we want to also acknowledge our African ancestors who are the very reason that we are here today. So we are thankful for them and their sacrifices. And we live simply to honor the sacrifices they made by continuing to work to bring about freedom, justice, and liberation to Africa, African people, and all of humanity. And so to get us started, we just simply start with our basic introductions. You can, of course, contribute to the All African People's Revolutionary Party, but this program, the Our Ancestors Voices, is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. The AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party based in Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which is defined correctly as one unified socialist Africa. That's what we're fighting for. That's our work on the ground to achieve that. And the way we do that is by uniting with existing revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground who agree with that definition, one unified socialist Africa. And there are some logos there on the screen of organizations that do agree that we work with in the effort to form the All African Committee for Political Coordination, which is called for in Kwame Nkrumah's book on the screen, also the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. That's our strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism, and that is the work that we're carrying out on the ground. An example of that is the QR code you see on the screen, which is for one of our many projects on the ground throughout Africa, in Burkina Faso. And you can put your so-called smartphone next to the QR code and we'll have the URL and it'll give you Burkina books, Patreon Burkina books. And we ask you to become a sponsor today and to sponsor our efforts to bring revolutionary literature to Africa on the ground. So that's what our comrades on the ground in Burkina Faso are doing. They have schools they're developing, a youth brigade. They provide constant events, political education events for the community there in Burkina Faso communities. So help us do this work. Become a sponsor. You can do as little as $5 a month, $5 a month, but you can commit to sponsor as much as you can. And this is how you support revolutionary Pan-African work on the ground in Africa. And Our Ancestors Voices is hosted each week by myself and Shakura, my biological and ideological daughter. So to get us started on this topic today, the bizarre institution called Veterans Day, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Sorry about that. Thank you. You all was having some slight freezing technical difficulties, but I think we're good now. So, greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And again, we are doing our best as a Pan Africanist organization to support our comrades at home on the continent who are raising money for the Thomas Sankara Center. Please consider donating. You can either donate through www.patron.com Burkina Books, www.patreon.com/Burkina Books, or www.abetterworld.me. And I will repeat those again before I end this slide. So that is www.patreon.com/Burkina Books or www.abetterworld.me. We thank you all so much because, ironically, we are doing everything we can to get funds raised so that books that are not perpetuating mistruths and lies can be sent to our comrades at home so that they can use those books to inform and to educate our youth so that they can have a much better understanding and not be thwarted by the truth, if you will. So I'm so excited to talk about this introductory, slide, because I think it's important to highlight that everything that we have come to understand, for the most part, has been manipulated and massaged to be formatted in a certain way, either from European dominant folks or from people in America who have access to European resources and money. And so, as long as Europe is benefiting, as long as America is benefiting, then it doesn't matter if the truth is actually being exchanged or not. And so, we can go through each one of these lies and think about just what exactly about it makes it not true, right? And so, if we start with thinking about how the US is a citadel or a foundation for freedom and democracy, I guess I would ask you all, we know that that's not true, because does that freedom and democracy, is that applied to everyone? Well, privilege has a lot to do, standing, positionality. These things have a lot to do with whether or not democracy and freedom are even applied to you. And how much money you have, your class status has a lot to do with that. So to just make the blanket statement, and I quote, that the US is a citadel of freedom and democracy, that's simply not true, because it doesn't take into account that a person's position, their privilege, their income, their class status, it doesn't take into account that those specific things that may vary from someone else have a lot to do with whether or not they can benefit from being of freedom and having the true art of living in a democratic society, right? We can also think about how every opportunity to succeed is available to everyone if you just work hard and work towards it, right? And we know that that's not true, because hard work will land you the opportunity you seek, or so they say. But yet, how are we defining hard work? And are we looking at the fact that there are several different layers that make it extremely difficult for people to navigate the world on a day-to-day basis? I've been thinking a lot about how crime around the world is increasing, but specifically in the city that I live in, there's been a lot of car break-ins, burglaries, car thefts, all that kind of stuff. And I keep wondering, when are people going to wake up and realize that it's so much more than just someone who's quote unquote lazy? And I think that those are still, theories based on white supremacy and based on colonization and based on class status. Because for a person to say, these people are lazy, why don't they just get a job? It's always so interesting to me how ignorant people can be, because I have gone through very different opportunities looking for income. And we're just using Memphis as an example. The livable wage here is trash. It is trash. I don't have children. I don't have a partner. I don't have people who are depending on me, but I do have an animal who depends on me. And it's very hard to just find a livable wage in this city, to the point where a majority of the jobs that I'm looking at, I don't even apply for them because they're not worth my time. Or the fact that they're asking you to do the kind of things they're asking you to do, but they're only charging you $10 an hour. That just blows my mind. And it blows my mind that they just don't have to care that $10 an hour is not enough. I mean, it literally just blows my mind. And so when we think about, well, if you work hard, you should be able to get what you want. And then it's like, well, no wonder people are breaking into cars, because if they were to get these jobs that are paying 10 or 11 or $13 an hour, how are they supposed to do anything? That's barely enough to pay for the gas for them to get to the job, let alone the utility bill. If they have a car note, if they need gas in their car, food is so expensive nowadays. It is so expensive nowadays. And so it just blows my mind. And if food and gas and cars are going up, then we know that rent and mortgages and taxes and rental properties and insurances and all these things are going up too. And so it's simply not true that if you quote unquote work hard, you will succeed. We're not even taking into account that you will have to deal with systems of oppression that will slow you down and make it very difficult for you. We're not taking into account that financially you may have some issues, especially if you are working hard to navigate that, but you're still running into discrimination when you're applying for jobs. You're running into housing discrimination when you're trying to move and get into a house. You're running into all these different things because you never had a good credit score, but you never had a good credit score because the system never allowed you to build up your credit the way you needed to, because you were always struggling and robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So it's very interesting that this notion is, if you quote unquote simply work hard, right, then everything will come to you. And that's just always been very interesting to me, because there are several people who work very hard and they have nothing to show for it, to the tune where they have maybe worked in a factory their whole life and now they have asthma and their respiratory system is slowly debilitating to the point where they're probably going to die, and yet they have nothing because again they don't have really livable wages, right? And they weren't appreciated, they were taken for granted when they were at their jobs. And so you have just all these different examples of just how difficult it is for people on a day-to-day basis. And so it's just simply not true that you have to work hard, because the argument is again your privilege, your class, your status, those kind of things, your positionality in society, how society perceives your positionality. All of these things factor into whether or not you will have to work at the same level that other people do. And I think it's really important to note that, because there are several people who have not worked hard at all. They have just been handed opportunity after opportunity. There's also people who have worked hard their whole life and they're still struggling to make ends meet to this day. There are single parents who are working several jobs and they do not see their children's faces because they are literally just trying to keep heat or air conditioning or a light on in that building where they live, right? To the tune where the children are raising the younger children because the parent is out working the 3 or 5 jobs that they have, right? And so I think that's important to note that. This is one of my favorites. There's a lie going around that white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism and the exploitation that occurred with those systems are all figments of our imagination. I love running into people who think that we live in a world where none of those systems of oppression exist. And when I bring them up, they look at me like I'm crazy and say, well, that's not really the case anymore. I was speaking to a group of students, I think last semester, and I talked about how patriarchy is a huge component in my dissertation. And one of the students said, well, patriarchy doesn't really exist anymore because, I mean, you're a woman and you're getting a PhD. And I said, I'm definitely not like a good example. I said, there's several issues where gender is coming into the place and where people are marginalized because they don't have male privilege and because they don't identify as men. And I went back and I talked to my dad about it later, and I gave him some examples. I talked about like getting married in 2023 and people challenging you if you quote don't take your husband's name. I reminded him of what the purpose of getting married was all about, to ascertain your property, which is literally a grown person, but yet they belong to you, which is why they're taking your name, that kind of nonsense. And so I talked to my dad about it later, and he said, well, it's not even that. It's just that, patriarchy is a system. And I was like, I wish I had said that. That would have been so good if I had said that. But I say it now. I say it now. I say it as many times as I can. I say it about white supremacy. I say it about patriarchy. I say it about capitalism. I use those examples all the time to remind people that these are literal systems. These are not individuals. I mean, they could be individuals from these systems, but for the most part, these are systematic ways that societies are functioning on a day-to-day basis, which means 1 or 2 people is not going to change the outcome of a systematic approach to how functioning takes place within this world. And so that means we need to literally change how the functioning occurs. We need to change the fact that people think it's okay to dismiss marginalized voices. We need to change that to where we have to understand that you are literally cutting off a marginalized person, unintended, by the way, because you are so conditioned that your voice is more important. What you have to say is more important than them if you identify as a man. It could be the same example if you identify as European. If you're European and you're constantly cutting off colonized people, you need to check yourself, because that means white supremacy is submitting itself into you and teaching you that even your words are more important. And we know that that's literally the definition of white supremacy. And so I think it's just important that society is telling us, oh, those things don't exist anymore. And they love to give you these examples about how you have a VP who identifies as a femme person and you had a president who identified as African. But yet, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that these systems are gone. That just means that those are really good puppets who still perpetuate capitalist ideologies, and they make sure to protect these systems from ever being eradicated while still lying to you and telling you that they don't even exist and that you don't have anything to worry about. Which is why, excuse me, you have to do your own research. That's why you have to increase your political education. This is exactly why. Because if you're relying on someone who does not mean you well to give you truth and to help you feel justified, you're never going to get anywhere that you need to get. To me, that would be like enslaved Africans trusting the plantation owner to tell them the truth. To me, it's the same exact thing. So you can use whatever analogy you need to use, but that's very dangerous. If the person who has already always misled you, you're still seeking truth and honesty from them. Why? They've already let you know that they can't be trusted. They've already communicated that to you. For the last 500 plus years, that's been communicated. So you're just choosing not to listen. And maybe it's time that you start, because these are things that are not based on truth. These are definite lies that we have been taught since we were in the womb. We've been taught these lies. Since we were in the womb, our parents have been taught these lies, our siblings, our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, every single person in our families. And these are not just lies that are existing in the US, they exist all over the diaspora and they exist on the continent. So we have to think more and more about this, because, Veterans Day is a holiday that is unhumanely celebrated in the US, but other people are still impacted by the choices the US is making around the world. They're impacted by that. So this is why I bring that in to say that these lies have been socially accepted, and we need to work really, really hard to really unpack them. Just because you've been literally born and raised understanding that these things are based on truth, when in actuality they're not, it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to critique them and to break them down and to try to dissect them. You have every right to do that. And that brings me to the last bullet. The last lie that we'll talk about is that we already have the information that we need in our life, which means you should not be analyzing things. You should not be assessing things. You should not be critical of things, and you should not be breaking things down. My favorite is when we find sources that we appreciate within specific news outlets. What do they always say to you? Thank you for joining the #1 news nation in the world, or we always have your news. We have your back. We are the first ones on the scene to give you the updated news that you need. Like, this is all the rhetorical propaganda that they have literally rehearsed and practiced and recited from time and time so that they can capture you and keep you hooked, to the point where when you watch channel 3, you don't turn to channel 7 or channel 10. You only stay on channel 3, because that's your, traditional routine of how you receive your information. And they know that, and they're counting on that, which means they get to control how they give you the information they want you to know. They are not going to share any information that shows them looking bad. They're only going to show you the information they want you to know. So you're not even receiving ethical information, because it's constructed in a way where you're not getting the whole picture. You're literally just getting what they, the people in power, want you to have. What's right about that? That's the most unethical thing I've ever heard of. And then to add insult to injury, they're telling you that you don't need any more information because they want to make sure that you're not going out actually critiquing what they said. They want to make sure that you're not double checking it. They want to make sure that you're not doing a real fact check on them. They want to make sure that you are content with what they have given you. If you're actually going out and double checking their work, then they may actually be held accountable. And more importantly, they may actually lose power one day. and that terrifies them. So you need to make sure that you are a good slave or a good colonized person, and you need to just receive what the master is telling you and not do anything at all to critique it. Don't analyze it, don't assess it, don't think critically at all. Don't do that. Just receive the tainted information that's based on mistruth and lies, and just be ignorant and be okay with it and be happy that you are ignorant. Don't ever try to seek new information, because that will only make things worse for those in power that don't want to lose their power. Meanwhile, we have so much that we need to do as a people so that we can regain control. Colonized people need to regain control of their lands. Marginalized people need to regain control so that we can actually be unsilenced and that we can navigate this world with respect, where we don't have to be harassed and targeted. People who are differently abled or LGBTQ folks need to regain control so that they're not being treated differently just because they're able bodied in a different way, or they're not being treated differently just because they identify as LGBTQ. We all have a responsibility, if we identify as oppressed, to regain control, because at the end of the day, we should not have to tolerate the mistreatments that we are receiving. And if we regain control, then the current people in power are not going to be able to maintain that power, because there are more of us than them. How do we regain control? Well, it starts with each and every one of us joining an organization that is working for justice. And we say it every weekend, and we truly, truly mean it. We do not insist that you join our organization. You can literally join any organization as long as it is working for justice, because all of these organizations are uniting together and they are targeting folks to take them out one by one. And so the more education that we have, political education we have, the more organizing strategies and organizing systems, and the more we work together with other people, the more we're going to be able to find contradictions in these dominant rulers, excuse me, and we're going to be able to find ways to give the indigenous people back their land, to take these folks out of power, and more importantly, to start promoting truth and justice, and an environment where truth and justice loving people can benefit from what is being said. Which brings me to my next slide, please. So now we can talk about some truths and some facts. Thank you so much. Now we can talk about some truths and some facts. Now, remember, the slide I just gave was talking all about lies, which is what we had access to, because all the lies that exist in the world, we have access to them. We are perpetuated with them every day. They are pushed down our throats every single day. They are literally exposed to us every single day. So now I'm going to talk to you about some truths that we don't have access to. The main reason is because our political education is not as high as it needs to be. We are not as intelligent politically about what has really gone on in the last 500 years or so. And we need to really get on board so that we can have a better understanding of that. Not just for African people, not just for indigenous people, not just for Asian descent, but for any person who has ever experienced oppression. This is why we need to have that kind of information, because when we understand what has taken place, a lot of times the dominant oppressor will repeat some of the same inhumane behaviors. So if we learn what took place in the past, then we might have a better way of dealing with it today. We also might be able to respond differently because we're expecting it. We might be able to prevent it because we already knew it was coming, because one of our older ancestors already talked about it in a book that we're reading. And we have a better way of discussing it just within our organizations, as well as other organizations that are working to eradicate that kind of behavior, so that we can all be on the same page of how we're going to terminate it. Because the whole point is to take it out and to not have it come back. That's the whole point. And so if we talk about some of these truths, then the first one is that this entire hemisphere is stolen land. That is a fact. We know that. We do not need anyone to justify that. We know that. Now, some of us may not admit it, but we do know it. I said to a student the other day, they said, I'm really looking forward to, they use unfortunately, the inhumane term for the holiday in this month. And they typed it in the Zoom chat during class. And I said, that's good. I'm really glad you're looking forward to Unthanksgiving. So even though the student didn't type the word that I said, I still said that word, because you still have to commit to your principles. And my principle is perpetuating as much as possible, promoting, advocating, announcing, yelling at the top of my lungs that this land I'm currently borrowing is not my land. And I will tell it to anyone who is uncomfortable enough to hear it. I will remind people that the indigenous people were slaughtered, being raped, and their land was stolen from them. I want people to be as uncomfortable as possible when I speak about that, because we are not in a position where we just get to forget what happened to them. We are not in a position, because if that's the case, then that means we'll forget about every other colonized group, including Africans. And I cannot allow us to forget about what has happened to all these people. We need to help change those conditions for those people, which means we need to talk about it as much as possible, as much as possible. And as I said before, if we know that it's true that the entire hemisphere is stolen land, then we also know that the wealth of those who it comes from have only gained that wealth by doing what? Exploiting the people and the resources of Black, brown, red, and yellow people. Taking everything that our lands provided and putting your own name on it so that you could profit off of it. Meanwhile, you didn't share any of that profit with the same people that you just stole that resource from. And you made sure to make sure that their conditions were even worse while you were still making the money that you needed to make so that you could establish your banks and so that you could establish your insurance companies and so that you can establish all this other BS that you still benefit from today. And now Europe is benefiting from it. Meanwhile, you're still taking these resources because you're capitalism, right? Your job is to protect the private profit of these organizations by any means necessary, right? So we have to continue to think about how that has left a huge gap in colonized people getting the resources that they need so that they can ascertain their land back. So we know that that is true, that this is stolen land. We also know that the people who stole it were able to steal it because they exploited the resources of every single person you can imagine, Black, brown, red, and yellow people. We also know that the only freedoms that exist in this empire are the freedom to believe that you are entitled and specially blessed by God simply because you exist as a slave within this cesspool country. And I like this one so much because I think when I think about people who are complaining about their job, they say, oh, I shouldn't complain. I should be grateful the Lord has blessed me. And I could understand that argument from a space of gratitude, but I don't think that we have to feel guilty about complaining about capitalism. I think that that's necessary and warranted because capitalism is one of the most vicious systems on the planet. It is one of the most vicious systems on the planet. And it's not fair for us to not be honest about the fact that it's vicious. If we're not honest about that, then that means we're just accepting the fact that it is just inhumane. And I feel like if we're accepting it, then that means we're less likely to fight against it and resist it. And we can never stop fighting against it and resisting it because capitalism doesn't deserve to win. It hasn't done anything to deserve what it's gotten. It's stolen everything that it has. If you think about capitalism as a person and not as a system, you can imagine a person who has literally taken every single thing, the land, the resources, the food, the clothing, the access to liquids, the minerals, everything that comes from those lands, this particular system has stolen. It has not earned any of that. And it has not shared the resources from the people it stole it from. So we have to continue to resist because we're not in a position where we can just continue to give up resources without a fight. It's not that simple. It is not that simple. Meanwhile, we're all impacted by that. So we need to continue to fight back because capitalism is crumbling and the system knows that. And the people protecting the system know that. That's why they're working overtime to stop us. And we need to work overtime to stop them and to continue doing the work that we're doing. We also need to understand that it has nothing to do with our religion because that's just one of the ways that the system teaches us to again be a good slave. If we pray hard, God will bless us and all that stuff. And I don't think that that's really safe for us to say that. I think as an organizer we need to understand that organizing is one of the ways that these realities can change for people. but simply praying to a God and then sitting back and not doing anything to change the conditions is very dangerous, not just for one individual, but for the other individuals who are counting on the circumstances to be different. We all have a responsibility to join an organization that's working for justice. And in doing so, then you might actually be able to use your religion in a way that makes a difference collectively for other people. We did a seminar on that a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not saying that religion and spirituality have no place, but I am saying that it is dangerous to think about how you have no freedoms in this world except for your belief in God, and that's why you're blessed. Well, that's very dangerous because that means that you're not acknowledging your ancestors who, excuse me, literally died, who were raped, who were victimized, who were tormented, who were tortured for you. You're not acknowledging that. You're only acknowledging one entity that you pray to. Meanwhile, your ancestors, if they hadn't made it, you wouldn't have, because your lineage literally would have been cut off with them. Your biology literally would have been cut out with them. So again, like just understanding, how do you use your spirituality to contribute to the revolution? How do you use your spirituality to change the conditions for others? And I stop with this last bullet and just say, you all must understand, we all must understand, you are either a part of the people's class or you are a part of the people's anti-people's class. It's one or the other. So you have to make a decision, and we hope that you will choose to join an organization that's working for justice, meaning the people's class, so that you can increase your political education and learn how to not celebrate institutions that promote lies, but instead do your own research so that you can get the truth. Ashe.
Ashe, thank you very much. And we will continue right along. Appreciate it as soon as the presentation decides to cooperate. And just say again, we want to encourage you to donate to the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. The URL is on the screen. There are a couple of ways you can donate. It's 100% towards our project on the ground in Burkina Faso, which we're focusing on right now. And please just drop us a note. If you see this in the recorded form, you could still write a note in the, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or however you watch it, and just say, yeah, I'm down with this. And that tells us that you became a sponsor. You don't have to, if you're worried about, the police already know, but if that's a concern of yours, we're not going to argue with you about that. Maintain your fantasy in your head, but still support legitimate revolutionary Pan-African work on the ground, whatever way makes you feel comfortable. Okay, so let's do that and let us know so we can gauge how effective the message is getting across about supporting this very important work. But we want to talk about the contradiction of so-called Veterans Day, right? There are many contradictions. We want to talk about them. You know, and we know every November at all the sporting events and in everything, we expected to bow down to the concept of the U.S. military. And obviously that happens November and all the 11 months of the year as well. You're expected to bow down. You're expected to stand for their Pledge of Allegiance. You're expected to do all these things. And the question you have to ask yourself is why? First off, why? How does a football game or a baseball game, a soccer game, a tennis match, or any of that, what does the U.S. flag have to do with any of those events? And if you say, well, it's a part of our country, or you know somebody that says that, the reality is that it really hasn't been that long that the national anthem and the flag have been a part of those events. This is something that's happened within the last couple of decades. And the reason why it happened is because the U.S. military pays these professional sports leagues millions of dollars to have that be a part of it. Why? Because they want to normalize recruitment into the U.S. military. And so they know that if they have it, there are millions of people that watch sports. For a lot of people, that's all they do is watch sports. So they know this. So they know if they have that become institutionalized in the what people do every Sunday when they watch football, or every day when they watch basketball or baseball or whatever the hell they're watching, then these people know that it'll normalize the concept that the US military is a positive institution and you should support it and you should respect it. That's why you have that. So that's the first thing. That's the first question you have to understand about the why it happens. The second part of that is they want you on some level of yourself to acknowledge and respect the US institution of war and destruction. They want you to believe that this institution of war and destruction is on the right side of history. And the only tactic they're using to do that is the age-old tactic of telling you a lie over and over, so much so that you begin to believe it. You just get overrun and begin to believe it because you don't have any other information to combat it. So that's what they're hoping on. And you can't argue with their success in doing this because millions of people support this concept and they can't even explain to you what it's about. So that's the why, right? And what is the truth about this? Particularly talking to people who have been in the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, National Guard, Coast Guard, all of these gangster organizations. You all know, if you're honest, some people just aren't honest. They don't have souls. And we're not talking to you if that's you. You know, go on with your little fantasy world and continue to believe it. Go on and walk out on a busy freeway and believe nothing will happen to you. Just take your fantasy to the fullest extent, and then that way we won't have to be bothered with your confusion. But we're talking about people who are really moral people. You know, we had an event the other night on the Palestinian situation and how the Zionism exploits African resources. And I was talking to the people in the room and on live stream about how if you're a moral person, then you always have difficulty. A moral person always has difficulty. You're never comfortable. You're always upset if you're a moral person. And that's a good thing. You're supposed to be. If you walk around in this backward world, in this backward cesspool society, and you're just fine, everything's fine, nothing bothers you, then you're a waste of human oxygen. You should be upset. You should be. Now, you have to manage ways so that you're not, driving yourself crazy. And there are many ways to do that. Certainly, those of us who do this work know how to do that. And we can help you do that if you struggle with that. We don't want anybody to be overrun with trauma and anxiety. But what we're saying is that for those people who are in U.S. military organizations, if you have morality, then you know that there's a lot of truth to what we're talking about right now. That these organizations that you're participating in did nothing to advance freedom and justice on the planet Earth. Really are not designed to do that, really don't exist to ensure that that happens, but exist solely to carry out an agenda of death and destruction for multinational billion-dollar corporations. That's primarily why the U.S. military exists. That's why we call them mercenaries for U.S. capitalism, because that's exactly what they are. So, what is the truth for those of us who are consistently told that we owe gratitude to the U.S. military? And the answer to that is we don't owe a goddamn thing to the U.S. military. They have not shed one drop of blood to advance the lives of any people on the planet Earth. Tell me when they did that. Where did they do that? Where did they shed blood that advanced humanity? You can't name one instance. Did it happen in Vietnam? Hell no. Did it happen in Panama? Did it happen in Libya? Did it happen in Vietnam? I said Vietnam. Did it happen in Korea? No, it hasn't happened in any of those damn places. Did it happen in Grenada? No. Did it happen in Iran? No. Did it happen in Iraq? No. Did it happen in Afghanistan? No. It hasn't happened in any of those places where they have shed blood to advance humanity. But if we have more time, I could tell you how it's advanced capitalist agenda in all of the military excursions they've waged in all of those countries that I mentioned. It didn't even happen in World War II. For those of you who like to run around here talking about the U.S. fought fascism in World War II, that's a goddamn lie. That's a damn lie. They didn't fight no fascists. The fascists were in power in Nazi Germany damn near a decade before the U.S. even bothered to get involved in the war. So you can't argue that. If somebody attacks you on the street and somebody else is standing there watching them, and they go get something to eat, go get a hotel room, stretch out, and then they come back after you've got the you know what beaten out of you, and they're like, okay, this is not good. That is not a person that deserves praise for what they've done. I mean, you must think that we're as crazy as you if you think we believe that. We know better than that. So we owe nothing to the U.S. military. And this institution uses 50% of the U.S. tax revenue. That's where all your if you work in this capitalist society, that's where your money goes. To U.S. military buying Apache helicopters, AR-15s, M1 rifles, M2, M16s, killing millions of people on the planet Earth. That's where your money goes. For the $100 million U.S. attack drone factory in outside of Niamey, Niger, in the Sahel region of Africa, that is the last thing that Africa needs, is an attack drone factory, and that's where your tax dollars go. 100 U.S. military bases all throughout Africa, that's the last thing Africa needs. Nobody in Africa wants these goddamn pirates there, but that's where your tax dollars go, you all. That's where they go. So you don't owe a damn thing to this institution. And that's why when I go to those games, I go sometimes, I sit there and I damn sure nobody better not say a damn word. Somebody did it first. One time they did. They're like, you're supposed to be standing up. And I said, you're supposed to be minding your goddamn business before you get hurt out here. You come to a game and you end up on a stretcher. That's not a good look. Mind your own goddamn business. You have nothing to do with the actions I take. And you're not smart enough to understand the actions. So mind your damn, drink your beer, eat your popcorn, and mind your own damn business before something bad happens to you. And you're damn right. I'm not going to buy. That's exactly the attitude I have. And I'll have it as long as I live on the planet Earth, because I'm sick of this nonsense. And I don't understand why more of you aren't. I really don't. So the contradiction of American patriotism. This is at the core of the problem. Because the reason why so many of you just stand up, put your hand over your heart, is because on some level, their propaganda has worked. And it's convinced you that this is your country and that there's some level of freedom somewhere. Even if you think, well, I'm not totally comfortable with it. Part of you thinks there's some level of truth to what they're saying, so you want to respect it. It's either that or you're just a damn coward and you won't do anything that puts you in a position to have to deal with any consequences for standing up for what's right. Or maybe it's a combination of those two things. Who knows? Only you know that. But the point is that we have got to continue to do this propaganda work around this question of American patriotism and American identity. You can't have patriotism on stolen land. It's not your country. So no, I'm not no people like you. Somebody was trying to give me a flag, something. I'm like, I burn U.S. flags. You what? I said, I think you heard me. I burn U.S. flags. I don't want that. Well, why would you burn it? I'm like, I'm not your tutor. I don't have time for that. If you got to ask me that question, you're too far gone. But I'm just saying, if you try to put that in my hand, it's going to get torched at some point. So we have to adopt a militant spirit around saying there is no such thing as an American identity. American identity equals white supremacy. We have to say that without fear and standing strong on that statement. The only people that belong here are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, whether they identify as native to the Americas, whether they call themselves Indians, whether they call themselves Chicanos, Mexicanos, Puerto Ricanos. Those are the people who belong in this hemisphere. The rest of the people, you don't belong here. It's not your land. So stop calling yourselves American, whatever the hell you put in front of it, and start saying this is indigenous people's land. Say that when you sit down for dinner in a couple of weeks. Say it. Be courageous for the first time in your damn life. You'll feel better. That's why you got all this anxiety. I have anxiety. I just don't feel I got to take this medication. That's part of why you got all that, because your whole goddamn life is a damn lie. And all of you is not stupid enough to accept that. And it's causing contradictions and conflict within your heart and your mind. Some of us don't have all that kind of nonsense. The only anxiety we have is because we have to stomach this and we can't change it overnight. But I don't have any anxiety about who I am as a human being because I know I'm trying my absolute best to challenge all this backward stuff. And I've suffered tremendously for doing so. And I'm so proud of it. I wouldn't wish it any other way. Any other way. So that's what we got to start doing is being courageous. You got a great opportunity coming up right now in a couple of weeks. This coming Friday, later in this month, to assert that there is no American identity. The strategy, of course, behind all of this reactionary propaganda is to convince you that everything that the U.S. does is justified. They stole the land, well, there are reasons for that. They stole our people, our ancestors, well, there were reasons for that. And a lot of people are just openly saying that now. Well, slavery was good for people. I appreciate that. I know some of you are so offended because, oh my God, I can't believe that they said that. Oh, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Willie Flim Flam and Sammy Sausage Head said this, and it's just so evil. Oh my God, I have anxiety. I got to take these pills because these people said that. Wait, shut up all that weak-kneed nonsense. Look, these people are demons. That's exactly what they're going to say. Now, let's get ourselves together and recognize that that's who they are. I would be surprised if they didn't say that. I'm glad they're saying it because that's what they really believe. That's what this system is built on. That's what it's maintained on. So just come on with it. Let's just deal with it out in the open. So it's helpful for us to deal with the reality of it, that they believe that everything they do is justified. If they went out and slaughtered millions of our people, black, brown, red, yellow people, poor, white, working class people, LGBTQ people, they would feel justified in doing that. They believe it's their right. They don't even believe that you're a human being if you're a part of any of those groups. They don't. So they don't care what happens to you. So I'm thinking about their welfare just about as much as they're thinking about mine. I don't give a damn what happens to them. That's how we wage and win this war. We got to start speaking their language. We got to understand who the hell we're dealing with. So that's very important. And because they want to convince us, again, that we're Americans. And in doing that, they make us accept and normalize everything this backward cesspool country does. The fact that you believe on some level that you're an American is why you don't know what's going on in the Sahel region right now. The fact that on some level you believe that you're an American is why you don't know what's going on in the Middle East. That's why you feel, oh, I can't say that I support Hamas because you have let them convince you of what your values are supposed to be. And what that means is your values are whatever they do is right, even though you don't even understand what the hell they're doing. If they did it, it's right. So that you can't even, a lot of you listening to this, you won't even say, oh, Hamas has every right. When you know damn well, when people are oppressed and exploited, they have a right to achieve their liberation by any means necessary. So I know that the Zionists in occupied Palestine have been killing Palestinians wholesale for decades. For decades, almost 100 years now, they've been doing this damn stuff to them. And so now in 1987, this militant group, what did you think was going to happen? What the hell did you think was going to, they just continue to be slaughtered until they just disappear? No. Repression breeds resistance. So now they got a group that's like, the hell with you. We don't have no tanks. Hamas doesn't have military. They don't have tanks. They don't have Air Force. They don't have planes. They don't have wholesale weapons. All they have is the spirit to be free. And that's all you need. Malcolm X talked about that in the Ballad of the Bullet speech. He told you then that the U.S. would lose the war in Vietnam. Not because the Vietnamese had superior weaponry, they didn't, but because of the spirit of the people fighting for justice is all you need. And that's what the Palestinians, they will never defeat the Palestinians. I'm telling you right now, they'll never defeat them. They'll never defeat the indigenous people. They'll never defeat the African masses. It may look to you because you're not engaged in the struggle and you don't really understand what's really going on in the world. You only understand what they want you to understand. So it may look to you like we don't have any a chance against them, but that's just because you don't know. It's not because that's the reality. The reality is that they're losing, and they know that. That's why they try so hard to propagandize you. You can't turn on a station where they're not promoting Zionist propaganda against the Palestinian people. You can't turn on a station where they're not promoting anti-African propaganda, anti-indigenous people. Why do they have to do that? If they're so invincible, they could just put the truth out there and they would win because they have the truth behind it. But they don't have that. So they have to constantly promote their backward ideology to justify their evil demonic practices. That's exactly what they're doing. And so, opening the door for the continued unfettered access of imperialism to exploit the masses of people on earth. That's all they're trying to do, nothing else. And the only way they can successfully do that is for you somehow, some way, on some level, to accept their propaganda, to accept it on some level. And for you to think, well, the problem is people like us. We're the problem. What we said, what we do, that's the problem. That's exactly what they want you to think. I don't even understand. Some of us, we're not even getting paid by them, and we do so much work for them. It's amazing. At least get paid. I respect the paid informants. At least they had the sense enough to get some personal gain. You doing it against your own interests and have nothing to show for it. At least Dennis Durham, who was infiltrated the American Indian movement and created all kind of sabotage. At least he had sense enough to get some money for it. William O'Neill in the Illinois Black Panther Party chapter, right? Mobutu Sese Seko in the National Congolese movement, right? At least those crooks and criminals had enough sense. You don't even have much sense as they do. You're just perpetuating the master's agenda without even understanding how you can get any benefit. I mean, you're an absolute disgrace for doing that. So let's shift gears and be positive to close out. Essential people's behavior, people's class behavior. Ahmed Secretary, an ideologue for the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, talked about the people's class and the anti-people's class. And the people's class being the class that represents the interests of all of humanity. And the anti-people's class being the opposite of that, the class that represents the interests of the capitalist ruling classes. So let's talk about some essential behavior, things we have to do. We have to make a clear and unquestionable break with American identity, period, on every level. Right now, stop calling yourself an American. I don't care what it is, Asian American, African American, idiot American. I don't give a damn what it is. Stop putting the American on me. Just say, well, I'm an idiot, just searching for my identity. That's better than calling yourself an African American. That's better than that. So stop using that term. I bristle when people call me that. Oh, you're African. I'm like, no damn African American. That's fighting words to me. Stop doing that right now. Stand up on yourself. I'm an African, born in America, fighting against this backward system that oppresses our people. That's my identity. I'm proud of it. I couldn't be proud. And then consequently refuse to ignore the contradictions of these backward propaganda institutions, like Veterans Day. Engage your family and friends around that, especially if they participated in the U.S. military. And if you approach it from a historical and logical standpoint, you'll be shocked to find that many of those people will agree with you because they're the ones who've been screwed by the U.S. military. They can't even get their VA benefits. They can't get anything. That's why 25 of them kill themselves every day because they put them over there and had them commit unconscionable acts. And then now they won't even give them the money to get counseling to work their way through that trauma that they have them engage in. So a lot of them will agree with you. So make it your mission to engage in propaganda that's designed to be people's class propaganda. And then use 80-20 as a tool to engage these people around these concepts. Like, don't preach to people, don't attack people, just ask them questions. Let them speak 80% of the time and you speak 20% of the time. Try it. Many of us are really going to struggle with that because all we do is run our damn mouths. We think that we're so correct. We can't do that. Now, we do this show, but when I'm out here organizing, I ask questions of people. I don't do all the talking. When I'm doing a presentation, that's what a presentation is me talking. But when I'm organizing, doing like I did a presentation earlier today in person here in Sacramento, at the anarchist book fair, and there were Africans there. I went to them afterwards to talk to them about joining the All African People's Revolutionary Party. That's our work. And I asked them questions. I didn't say anything. They heard my presentation. I didn't have to say anything else. But even if I hadn't given one, I still would be asking them questions like, what are you interested in seeing happen? This way I know how to properly engage them because I know what's important to them. It's not about me telling them what I think is important. It's about me understanding what's important to them. What do you think about the concept of us being African? That's what I asked them. How they answer that tells me whether they're people that would be interested in being recruited into the AAPRP process. If they say, no, absolutely not, I'm not interested in that, I wouldn't start preaching to them. I just tell them, well, you got to be in some organization. What is it that you want to do? And go from there. So use those tools. And then make a commitment to change your life based upon these principles. That's real simple, you all. Just say, I'm not an American, and stop doing that. Stop standing up and respecting their institutions that spit all over you and everybody like you. Have some dignity. That's all that means. Like, decide you're going to have some courage moving forward. You will respect yourself more if you do that, and people around you will respect you more. That's important because that is how we create the environment and the culture that allows so many more people to want to be a part of the work that we do, and will show them that we can win. You don't have to have 20,000 people with you today to show people we can win. All you have to do is stand courageously in the face of injustice. That's the most powerful thing on earth. That's the most powerful thing on earth, is when you do that. My ancestors that stood up against these vicious criminals, even though they knew they were going to die. And there's so many stories like that. Like I mentioned, my great-grandfather was hung in Louisiana on October 31st, 1931. Felix Dehaut. And the transcripts, I contacted people, I did research. The transcripts I got from the pastor of the church that way back then, this church is still in existence, did what they could to support my great-grandfather. They told me that when they hung him, the last thing he said is, when you hang me, kiss my black ass. And that was the best acknowledgement of family history I ever got. And I asked them, sir, can I pay you to send me that transcript? And they did. And so that's beautiful, right? That's what we want. That's dignity. Nothing wrong with that. You might, oh my God. Well, that's because you're sick in the head. But for people that want to feel free, that gave me the greatest feeling of freedom that I could get. And I know I'm from a lineage of people who stood up against this nonsense and will continue to do that. Whoever, clearly you can tell listening to my own daughter that that's not going to stop with me. If I drop dead today, it'll continue. And this, you all, by creating more and more people like this, that's how we get free. So we thank you for coming. We ask you to come back. We're going to continue with this, battling these capitalist propaganda institutions. So next week, why we push saying Thanksgiving. We don't say Thanksgiving. There's no damn thing. That's a damn lie. So join us next week when we talk about that. And go to our Forward Ever shop. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aprp-intl.org to do that. abetterworld.me. These presentations are all there. Check them out. And hoodcommunist.org. You should definitely check that out if you want revolutionary Pan-African voices. They're from all over the world. Please become a sponsor for Burkina Books, an on-the-ground project in Burkina Faso of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The QR code is there. The URL is there. You got all the means to make it become a sponsor. You can do as little as $5 a month. Support revolutionary Pan-African work. Please, all of our programs on the bottom of the screen there, they're there. We want to ask you to support those programs. And please buy my book. Tell people about it, A Guide for Organized Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. You can buy it on Amazon. I know people don't want to go to Amazon. I don't want to go to Amazon. But Amazon prints the book free and sends it everywhere in the world. If you have a better solution on how I can do that, I wish you would stop with all that other ancillary nonsense and tell me you can do it better like this, and I do that tomorrow. But nobody has that. All you have is a bunch of talk and fluff. I'm trying to get books all over the world that can help us get free. You got a way to do that, then open your damn mouth and show us how to do it. Otherwise, shut the hell up and tell people about the damn book. That's all we're asking you to do. That's all we're asking you to do. And I'm not going to say it any different, because I'm tired. People come to me with all this nonsense all the time. And people that are just sitting in front of their TV playing video games, trying to talk to me about, well, I don't go to Amazon. You just went to Shell and put gas in your car. You went to Chevron. You think that's better? You're so morally correct. Look, we're trying to get free. We're going to use whatever resources we have to do that. And we just ask people to help us do that and help yourselves in the process. Is that wrong? I know it's not. I'm not at this. Just a question putting out there. I know it's not wrong. It's absolutely correct. So feel good about all this, because we are winning, you all. Stay strong. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and practice these things we've talked about. You ain't no American. You're a human being who stands for justice, and you should be proud to articulate yourself that way. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening, or whatever day it is that you're looking at this. Forward ever, backwards never.